Hi, everybody. I'm David, and I don't know. I can see everybody's names. I don't know if people want to just go around and say your name and how many children you have, or anything else you'd like to share, just to start off. And we can start. I don't know. Samantha, do you want to start?
I'm Samantha. I have 3 kiddos. My oldest is 12. She's right here. I have a middle who will be in 1st grade come September. And then I have the baby.
Aw.
So I'm a big advocate right now because obviously, my oldest, we are homeschooling, so it's kind of doing its role, but the other 2, this is kind of their future. So thank you.
Okay. I don't know. Victoria, do you want to
Hi.
say something?
Yeah, I have a 7-year-old who is just about 8, and he was in the Waldorf school in Keene. And when they did masks, I pulled him. I got really sick from masks. I got chronic bacterial pneumonia and in the spring from wearing, and I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I didn't have to wear that all the time for work, but just I had a little bit of allergies and just wearing them, walking in Target, and just mouth breathing because you're moving fast with a huge cart full of kids and stuff, and I got bacterial pneumonia, and I was terribly sick all summer, so I will not put my children in masks who just appeared. They escaped, and here they are. And okay, that's enough, you guys. And I have a 3-year-old, and so we're homeschooling. And Marco, please don't do that, honey. Okay, thanks. Okay, and usually he's really camera shy and stage fright, even though he's a big actor, but of course now he's gonna be like this. So we're just trying to figure out, I'm serious, please go find daddy, go. Okay. He's home, I saw the car. Trying to do everything. It's just, and my husband's home working, which is great, but just struggling with homeschooling and having a 3-year-old, and a 7-year-old. My son, he has Tourette syndrome and he has a lot of tics, and he pops up out of his chair all the time, and it's just hard with a 3-year-old. And I don't know how I would do it with still the baby, because last year when she was 2 in the spring, that was really tough, and we kind of gave up on homeschooling. So here we are.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay. David, did you want to say something?
Sure. I have 3 kids. One is in public school and she just turned 14. The others are out of the public school system. And she continues to remote learn. And my school system recently, after pushing pretty hard to have a couple days a week and then the rest of the remaining part of the week be remote learning, they demurred because of they claim a staffing problem, whatever that means. I'm not sure. It wasn't expounded on. They just said they had a staffing problem. So she won't be going back to school at the date that they newly created after creating several previous dates that always get pushed. And I'm not hopeful that they're going to open up the schools anytime soon. So I'm curious to see what other people who have similar concerns have to say and what potential solutions there are versus, the what I would call a kind of stability versus instability model of manufacturing hysteria. I'm not sure how else to put it bluntly. So, and it's very hard to find people to talk to about it, obviously. So thank you for inviting me, and I'm all ears.
Thank you, David. Brenna, you want to jump in?
My name is Brenna. I have twins who are 14. They attend the Leaf Charter School in Allstead. This is their first year, 9th grade. And I decided last spring to put them in Leaf because I thought it would be pretty healthy and holistic. And so after spending most of the fall in tents, which was okay with me, that was a good solution to be outside most of the time. They're now indoors, of course. And most of the students at LEAF are actually doing remote. My kids and I chose to go in person. So they're there 5 days a week, but all the teachers are teaching remote because they're all terrified. I mean, it is not a little bit terrified. They are, as you said, hysterical, and the aides hysterical. And every day they spread the hysteria to my kids who are trying to learn. And that is the most difficult thing for them. The wearing of the mask has caused problems for them, even though they're given some liberty to take it off at their station, which means their desk at LEAF. They have to wear it when they're around other kids and whatever. And one of the ways that the aides spread the hysteria is by screaming and overreacting if they see a kid who touches someone or touches their mask or pulls it away. And it is nonstop. It happens many, many times during the day. They're wearing, the people working there, there's only 2 aides. There aren't real teachers anymore. They're wearing double masks. And that in itself is a signal that they're terrified. But so that's the story. Even at LEAF, it's the same hysteria.
Thank you, Brenna.
Mhm.
Frank, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi. So I have 2. One is 7 and another just 1. The 7-year-old, so we were in Keene when all of this started. Keene, of course, closed their schools. We did the remote learning through his first grade curriculum till the end. And then we moved up to Warner in September. The schools here are open. They've been open. I don't know if they are now. We've decided to homeschool. Frankly, the reason there is I've always worked from home. I have done so for the last 12 years, and I've thought about homeschooling anyway. So this obviously was a ripe opportunity to do that. But I couldn't, in good conscience, send my child into these dystopian COVID 1984 environments. I don't see how it's possible that all of this is not damaging these children in very meaningful ways. I just don't see any way around that. And so if I don't absolutely have to, and I certainly feel for parents who actually have no choice, we chose not to. And it's, as you can imagine, it's challenging.
Thank you, Frank. Jean, would you like to say something?
Sure. So I have 2 children. We have 2 children, 7 and 4, and they were actually enrolled in the Waldorf early childhood, and the 7-year-old was going to be going into the first grade. And, when they were talking about masks in school, but being outside most of the time, we were like, well, let's think about it. And then I heard that they were going to be outside all the time with the masks all the time. And then I was like, absolutely not. This has just gone to the point of ridiculousness. Mm-hmm. So we did, take them out, and they're home. And, my wife works from home. But it's challenging, with kids. We do have a tutor come in, a few days a week and spend some time, but it's a challenging situation. And my most, the thing that again, like Frank said, I feel a lot worse for other people who have no choice, because they just can't, they have to work and stuff, that they have to do whatever with their kids. So I feel lucky in that regard, and I can work from home on a lot of days and help out. But my kids are really thriving for interaction with other kids. And what we found is that, some of their closer friends, their parents, have basically shut them off. They're like, no, we're only staying within our certain bubble. And I think it's just really sad. Kids need, I mean, the one thing about school is the socialization and the learning to connect with other kids and develop relationships and develop their own, emotional and mental intelligences. So, yeah, hoping that we can bring light. I mean, I think there's a lot of things changing now, all of a sudden, miraculously, that they're going to be doing the testing differently and less cycles and all that stuff. So I think it's going to change the landscape dramatically, and hopefully that will translate to where our kids can get back to some kind of normalcy in life. But I guess that's why we're here.
Thanks, Gene. Hi, Marcus, you want to say something?
I have my youngest sons are 8 and 4. Friends with Marco over there. That's why he couldn't get off the camera once he saw his buddy in the background. We were doing Waldorf school, probably out of laziness. I'm really a fan more of unschooling. Never, I think we have the society and product of our educational public system today. None of the people in power send their own kids to those public schools. Seems like a tad bit of a conflict of interest to me, or people with money. And that's how we get the society of people who can't critically think. So we're doing homeschooling now. I would never entertain putting my kids in it. And we just try to surround ourselves with like-minded people. I do not think things will be getting better. I think they're giving that as a temporary bump. I think you're talking years more of continued craziness, and society will continue to bifurcate. So we're just trying to be with like-minded people, prepared, do the best for our children, stay positive, and take it from that angle.
Thank you. Yeah. So, at this point, does somebody feel like they want to talk a little more in depth about what their kids are going through, what they've been through specifically?
I can give an example of
Frank?
something that happened just today. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
did I cut somebody off? I couldn't hear. I apologize if I did.
After you, if that's all right.
Okay, I think there's a slight delay on my end, so forgive me. I attended a breakfast event this morning in Henniker. I took my 7-year-old with me to get out. We don't get out all that much because, well, yeah, I don't have to explain why, right? Things are crazy. The anxiety that I see in my kids now, in light of this, is it's striking. We're in the car. We had to leave early because he was just miserable. And it's because, and he even expressed this himself. He says, well, I don't come out to public anymore. I says, why? And he says, because the government has effed it all up, he blurts out in the back seat of my car. And I mean, obviously I have to reflect and say, okay, so he's clearly, getting things from me and maybe my wife, and we're, everybody's so anxious and we're always talking about these things that are happening, and this must be building anxiety. And so I'm certainly open to opinions on how to deal with these kinds of things. I mean, should I not be so expressive? Should I not be, discussing things? I don't know. But the anxiety I've not seen before in him quite like this. And this is now how many months later, this disruption in his social life, I could see is having consequences, even though we're doing the best we can to try to shelter him from some of the dystopian ridiculousness that they're being forced into the institutions. So yeah, I mean, it's getting to a point where I'm starting to fear that even removing him from these environments is going to have a psychological impact.
Yeah, I get it.
It's almost like that movie Life is Beautiful, right? The Italian movie where they avoid the Nazis and the father has to make it a game. I try to figure that out myself. It's like,
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Samantha, were you trying to say something before?
Yeah, so I just wanted to give a little background. I've been in the early childhood education field since 2008. I went back to school and just studied basic childcare. When I had my daughter, I wanted to be able to work with her and keep her with me at all times. And I've pretty much done the same with all three. I've private nannied, I've private tutored, and I've worked in multiple different childcare settings with all ages. After school, all the way to infant, and right now I'm in toddlers. So being around kids so much, my whole fight is for kids. Having 3 kids myself, my whole fight is for kids. Seeing what happened in March when they shut down seemed very drastic for a lot of kids. They didn't know how to process it. And I think a lot of parents were more in shock and didn't know how to process it and talk to their kids about it. I saw what was coming. Come September, the way that they went about the shutdown, the way that they kind of put this pressure on adults and kids. I personally have never put on a mask. I have never forced my children into masks. There is one instance where my oldest wears one when she goes horseback riding. It's a choice that her and I had a lengthy discussion about. They only let you in the barn with a mask. So initially I was like, absolutely not. And then she had the option to kind of help out in the barn. And I was like, I need to kind of weigh my options. Like, am I holding her back or so I looked into it. I just got her a wicked thin cloth one that literally you could blow out of. It's not stopping anything. It's not doing anything. It's just there, as that symbol, just I comply, I comply. So pulling her out was a hard decision because her whole thing was, what about my friends? And for me, it was, I want the best for you. I want your education to be an education. Yes, the socialization is important. I have enough like-minded friends that kind of did the same thing. They either put their kids in a private school or homeschooled. So I wasn't worried too much about the socialization. I was more worried about her not getting an education. My daycare does a remote learning, and I see these kids come in 8 o'clock in the morning. They're all hooked up. They've got their headphones on. They got their laptops in front of them. They've got their border of, that cardboard just surrounding them, isolating them from their peers, their teachers, the world. And they're focused for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. Me personally, I don't want to stare at a screen more than an hour. No way, I couldn't do it. And these kids are trying to learn. They're trying to learn from teachers who are reinforcing things not related to learning, who are trying to keep up with the kids who are barely even on the same track as where they should be. And the kids that want to learn are now getting bored because they're not learning anything. It's a mess. It's a disaster. Nobody's learning anything. They have done so well dumbing down the new wave of the incoming society that it's mind-boggling that parents don't see it. It breaks my heart that parents don't see that these kids are struggling. And I have 10 kids in my toddler class. 5 of them are well on the spectrum. That shows me something. There is something implemented now. Like, I don't want to turn it into a vaccine thing, but there's a lack of learning. There's a lack of education on the parents' end when it comes to certain things at this point. And are we doing the best for our kids? Are we giving the kids the best they have? Their building blocks of foundation start at birth. And we need to focus on giving them kind of that strong structure to build. So I stayed home with my oldest for 2 years. And by 18 months, I mean, 50-word vocabulary, all her body parts, colors, numbers, everything. When she went into school, just thrived. She had no issue. You know, by 5 years old, she was reading chapter books. My 5-year-old is not the same way. She doesn't learn like that. I tried, I worked with her. It was nightmarish. She should be in kindergarten. Yes, I was considering a public kindergarten. Merrimack had a decent kindergarten system at one point, but she's not learning from me, and she's not learning from the daycare because it's fun, it's play. And I'm going to have to put her in a private school, but a lot of private schools are still kind of on that mask, like we mask them just a little bit. And I don't want that. I don't want my kids restricted in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think it's beneficial to them. It's not developmentally appropriate to put a mask on a child and expect them to keep it on all day, no matter what age they are. So I'm having a really hard time right now trying to figure out what's best. I'm homeschooling my oldest. The breakfast that the other gentleman was going to, I went to the last one they had on Sunday, and met a lot of like-minded parents that did the same thing. They started homeschooling their kids, and they made a point to really like focus on the education piece. So the homeschool program I do for her, we pay for, I go over with her. There's extra stuff. She's got art projects. But where does that leave us come September? You know, her dad is really pro school, not government schools, because we both agree that it's kind of an ulterior motive. But even private schools, like, do we find a good one? What are we going to pay for a good one? Is it sustainable to keep her all the way through college? And then what happens for college? And then my 5-year-old, now I've got 2 of them in school. So it's been a struggle. You know, I think all of us here are here because we want the best for our kids, and we're really fighting for a normalcy, and not a normalcy that has some restrictions, a non-restrictive normalcy that we can look at and say, we are doing the best for our kids. Our kids need that socialization. Those kids need to be hugging their friends. They need to have sleepovers. They need to have in-person learning. So it's more than just learning. It's being with their friends learning. You know, that's what we had. That's how we retain the knowledge, because we could bounce ideas and fun things off of our friends. So, I mean, I'm hoping there's a good solution. I'm hoping there's more people like us that are here really trying to fight for the best for our kids, but that's kind of where I'm at now.
Where was that? What was that breakfast?
The breakfast was in Henniker. So Shalon and David Breger put it on. I am part of like a community, the Absolute Defiance community. So I'm sure maybe some of you guys have heard about the whole Governor's House protests. And there was an instance for a candlelight vigil at Governor Sununu's house, where we were honoring those who have died non-COVID related, suicides, any mental health issue, and those who have lost stuff, their job, their houses, you know, their families. So we went there, and there was 8 of us. We showed up, there was about 50 state police. We were kind of like labeled almost like terrorists, but we were just there kind of showing our support for the people with this asinine kind of shutdown. And we ended up having one person get arrested, and they tried to make a mockery out of us. It was an unjust arrest. They cited us all for picketing. We were not picketing. So in this group, we've kind of established other like-minded people. We're not terrorists. We're not bad people. A lot of us are there for the COVID vaccine. There's an elder lady there. I can't remember her name. Sweet. She was all for everything. she's kind of just lived her life. She was like, hey, I'm here solely because of the restrictions that he's put for this vaccine. He's now not allowing an opt-out measure for the COVID vaccine. So she was like, that scares me. I don't want it. So she was there kind of on her own stance for that. I'm there for my kids and their future. I don't want to see what their life is going to be like in the next 5-10 years, the way things are going right now. So part of that, I reached out to a different community, and then the breakfast brings together a lot of like-minded people. When we were there, I probably met 4 or 5 homeschooling parents and just a lot of people who don't believe in the whole mask thing. They're like, it's making people sick. It's not healthy. It's not, developmentally appropriate for children. And it was really nice to see. So.
Yeah, it's good to connect. Anybody else want to jump in here?
I'd like to talk, David.
Sure.
I agree with Samantha that the education that the children are receiving now and probably for many years in the past is not really adequate. It's not healthy all the way. And there's a lot of things that need to be improved. And I don't know how we're going to do that, except my kids chose to be in school because they wanted to be around other kids. And they told me how important it was to have that social interaction. And what I'm seeing is that my kids are spreading the word. My kids are talking back to the teachers and aides when they lay down the law about, all how they're being unsafe with something. My son Liam will say why they're not unsafe and ask why the teachers are so frightened. And so having kids in school has a benefit that the kids themselves can be advocates, and it's where they want to be. So my kids are going to have to wear a mask sometimes, but they found they can put a hole in the first layer and basically get more air into their mask. That was their idea. And I just want to mention too about the masks that I went to a new dentist, holistic, down in Massachusetts. And he told me he is totally against the masks. And he told me that what masks do is that there's a slight rise in CO2 when you wear a mask. And the body senses it because the body's evolved over thousands and thousands of years to sense high CO2. So the amygdala in the center of the brain responds, and the flight and fight response kicks in, the fear kicks in. So the more you wear that mask, the more fearful you'll be, is what he told me. And by the way, he let me take off my mask, and he believes all the things that we're talking about here. And I was so glad to find this dentist. So when I learned that, it made me even more angry, because you do see that around you. Who's the most fearful? The people pushing the mask. They're wearing their masks in their cars, walking down the street. They're wearing their mask at home, everywhere. And so it's affecting the brain, among other things. And so what do you want to say?
No, just tell them about me saying stuff back to Kavya.
Well, I did say that. So there are benefits to being at school. The kids are talking back for themselves, and we can talk all we want here, but it's when kids are in the world, they can be the most effective. And I hesitate to homeschool or remove my kids from society, because what's going to happen? How can they feel part of something and want to change it if they're being in an isolated environment at home. So that's just my 2 cents on letting your kids go back to school, possibly.
Fair
Can
enough.
I,
Yeah,
can I add,
Victoria.
Matt, I was gonna add something on the dentist visit. Is that okay? Is that, okay? So this summer, my husband and I have an apartment in New York City and we live down there, and did the back and forth and all that. So we haven't been there in a while. So I'm still in touch with New York City news, and the dentist, when everything was allowed to open up again, did find that people were actually getting a lot more cavities and gingivitis because, again, with the CO2 and when you're breathing through a mask, it dries out your mucosa and the saliva, and you need the saliva to keep your teeth clean. And with the extra bacteria, people were getting more gingivitis and everything. And also when my son went to the dentist in June, he was the last appointment on their 3rd day back open. And he was the first child after 3 full days who did not have a cavity. And that was June. And that could have also been that routines were off. Maybe brushing wasn't happening as much in the morning, maybe not going to school. So there are definitely health issues with the mask. I know this is more of a psychological account, how to figure out how to deal with our kids' brains and our brains. And the other thing I was going to say also, again, with the psychology of the masks, and this doctor's been like wiped off the internet. As a German doctor, or he might not be German, but he's in Germany, and he had gone to the Karolinska Institute or had done research there in Sweden. And he had put some videos out about his concern as a pediatrician, seeing children coming in with all kinds of problems, health problems from masks, from headaches, aggression, things like that. And he started noticing that their adrenaline, he started testing their adrenaline levels, and I believe through urine tests, and found really elevated adrenaline. And his hypothesis was that with not having the appropriate oxygen, having too much CO2, again, it's that fight or flight, and that your body does, it's the same thing that you were saying, the body does adjust. And now you've adjusted to a higher adrenaline level. And now you have children, and this is the other reason because I saw this over the summer, it's the other reason I will not put a mask on my kids, not doing it. And the adrenaline levels that go up and they're for elevated times, and what is this doing to a child's development if they're at a heightened level of adrenaline? And if you go online and look what happens with elevated adrenaline, there's a lot of bad health effects, and some of that is aggression because you're in constant fight or flight mode. And having a child with Tourette's and issues, and we had just gotten him to stop putting his hands in his mouth all the time. Now they want us to have a mask over his face. And when I talked to the school about that and said, look, I can't do this to my kid with Tourette's, he's constant, and the movement and the everything, and the picking and the hands and the everything. And they were like, oh, there's nothing we can do. I mean, he has a diagnosis, and everything we were trying to do, I mean, it's been such a trouble. I mean, his preschool teacher suggested that we buy a chewing necklace thing for him because he was constantly chewing his clothing and putting things in his mouth in preschool. And so for a while when he was 4 or 5, I actually had like almost like a chew toy hanging around his neck, and he was chewing his balaclava all the time. He puts holes in it, and now they want us to stick a mask on him right when I'm getting him to get his hands out of his mouth. No, not doing that. So anyway, I just wanted to second that on sort of the health issue, but it does have a psychological the health. And what I guess what I'm trying to say is that the physical aspect does go with the mental aspect, because as you're depriving oxygen, then you're having these other problems, and then they affect the family. I mean, my tension is up like this, I can't try to keep my son seated for schooling, and he pops up to see what the 3-year-old does. Then am I putting the 3-year-old on the TV too much so I can concentrate on the school for my son? And I have to be right there with him because he's popping up here or there, and the concentration level or the activity level with him is tough. He's almost 8. And so this year I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend more time with a 3-year-old. We're more in workbooks where he can hopefully be a little bit more self-directed once I give him the assignment, but he's constantly popping up to see what we're doing. So that's the struggle. And then, then how we react. Then my husband can kind of hear in the background the dull noise of the fighting and when it gets to the point where I'm like, okay, stop, come back, sit down, come sit down, come sit down. And then I get to that point where I can't take it. I'm like, sit down, because I try with the niceties, try to bring him over, take him back to his seat, and it's constantly popping up out of that chair. And then my level of anxiety goes up. And then my husband comes down for lunch, and he's been hearing this in the distance while he's been trying to work, and he comes down and his fuse is lit just from that. He's like, respect your mother. And then there's just way too much yelling, and it's that escalation. That's been, the challenge for us in trying to keep, try to be the parents here and not do more damage to the kids by not having that patience level. That's, the challenge. And then the poor 3-year-old just hears the yelling all the time, poor little thing. And, she should be having little friends at this point and being able to run around with like even just a little girl to play with and not have, everything be, soldiers and killing and guns and battles and everything. All of her little games that she tries to play all devolve into boy games. And, I don't have a little girl for her to play with. So that's all the challenge that we're trying to deal with, and trying not to damage the kids more by, we have some friends, Marcus is here, and we met with Jean's son, and we're able to have some playing so they get some out, away from each other. But it's not enough for what the kids need to engage in. And at the same time, I don't want to, he knows not to be scared of this, but now I'm telling him that what all of his society is doing is wrong, and that they're in temporary psychosis, and that he can't have a mask because it's wrong. And now he has a friend who goes to school and wears a mask. So what is, we're sending mixed signals. Then I'm going to send him to a school next year. Hopefully the mask will be over and I can send him back to school. And now the people who are supposed to be teaching my child science are like science deniers. Like, kids don't spread it. Like his age, high school, it's different, but the masks don't do anything. They probably nebulize it and spread more aerosols. And it's just, the people we are supposed to be trusting to teach our kids science, look what they're doing. And to hear like with the teachers and everything gone off the deep end, gone cuckoo. And, they have a higher chance of dying in a car accident on the way to school than they do from COVID. So that's my struggle, is trying to find that balance and have, what it's doing to the 7-year-old as far as, okay, I could trust my parents, but now if he goes to school, is he gonna trust to learn? I don't know. It's hard.
Yeah.
And then a little 3-year-old goes and sees pictures of models in magazines, and she goes, Mommy, that lady doesn't have a mask on, and she's home with me most of the time. And they're not out seeing all these people with masks, because we play with people who don't wear masks. And, to have a 3-year-old point out in a catalog that the model's not wearing a mask is just, it drives me insane.
Yeah, it's a tremendous challenge, and the strain on the kids, but also the strain on the parents to try to make things as good as they can for the kids, given all the obstacles.
Yeah, I think, I'm sort of on board with Victoria there. And we don't really want to raise our kids in a culture of fear, of being afraid of everything. And, that's really the culture that's out there. And so, it's nice to be able to find some people who, we can have some interaction with that's not going to promote that. And just, kind of like Frank, not the extent, but, I find my son saying, oh, the stupid masks and the stupid people that, and we're like, well, it's not that the people are stupid. They just don't, really understand. It's hard to kind of separate that and keep the kids isolated from your own thoughts and feelings. And, wanting to have sort of the things that we had when we grew up, the ability to just be a kid, and not be living in this dystopian nightmare. So I don't know what the solution to that is, but hopefully one of you has it here for me.
I was going to propose a solution, and I think that's where we have to be now. Can I talk, David?
Yeah, anybody can. Yeah.
So I wore a shield, the kind with the glasses frame, while I was teaching all last term in the fall, and it was wonderful. The students could see me, and I had no problem communicating. I felt comfortable, and I am expecting that when I get my class schedule and go back, that they will make me wear a mask. I'm assuming they're going to do that. But what I have to say about wearing the shield is that it would be a good compromise if we could propose that school students wear the shield. It does a lot of great things. It keeps kids' hands off their face, and it does stop the spread if they're worried about that. Very effectively, actually, probably more so than the mask. And we all know the kids' masks are dirty. They touch their face all day, much more than in a normal situation. So the mask, if we could have a movement the shields, if we could have a movement to propose the shields in school for kids, I think the kids would be fine with it. I would be fine with it. They can breathe. It's just an idea. It really is a problem, the fear level of people in the school systems, and they don't want to be sued now. I'm sure the administration has a vision of, I'm going to get sued as a superintendent, if I don't mask up all the kids. So that's an idea. Thank you.
That's one of the issues, is not enough people are suing personally, physicians. You're seeing more with like Peggy Hall and that whole crew. And there's some state by state things going around proving that the emergencies are based on bunk numbers and actually going after even physicians personally now. And I think that needs to pick up more steam instead of compromising on fascist tactics. People have to unite, come together, work outside this crazy system, live their lives as best they can. And we need to, as Frank knows, we got a cease and desist order last week for being unmasked at a grocery store. And I am looking to fight it legally.
So Marcus, you got a ticket, or what does that look like, the cease and desist situation?
Well, I actually stopped supporting the place months ago, but it's a local grocery in our town that has, good meats and so forth. And my wife went in there and they actually lied. She actually put one on. I've never put one on. I refuse to. But yeah, they sent a cease and desist from the restaurant to us that they'll call the police and yada, yada if we come back. So I've been crafting a conditional notice of acceptance. It's got my fee schedule of $1,000 an hour for anything related to this going forward, and requesting proof of claim.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the store itself sent you a cease and desist.
Yeah, not a legal authority.
Okay.
Just a little side note, I was just saying to one of my clients the other day that our kids have not had any like sniffles or colds or anything. And I feel like we're denying them the opportunity to build their immune systems here. Like why, every year they, get snotty, and it's just part of the natural building and workout of the immune system. And they're not getting the opportunity to do that this year. What effect is that going to have on them later in life? I wonder.
Yeah. No.
Well, that's on purpose for sure.
What are people seeing with their kids? What are some of the, Frank had mentioned the anxiety. What else are people seeing with their kids in this situation?
David, I'm seeing severe infections in both of my kids around the face and mouth and nose. And Liam had to go to the I don't know what they teledoctor medical visit. He had a golf-size cyst on his chin directly related to the mask.
Yeah.
And yesterday he had nosebleed and horrible dryness on his mouth. Cadence had what we think was impetigo all across her chin. And this is from the bacteria that is being held in their face masks. It's so dangerous.
Yeah.
And my daughter, as you know, has recovered from leukemia. And so she has been immune compromised, but I sent her to camp. I sent her to school, and she's been around everyone, including your family. And, that was the right decision. I was probably the only one up at Dartmouth that said to the doctors there, the masks are horrible. You got to stop this. And my thought about the doctors is they take an oath not to do harm. How can they possibly mask kids or adults without knowing what the harm is?
Mhm.
And if they cannot say definitively that no harm comes from wearing this mask, then they can be sued for not heeding what would be a measure to know the risk of wearing masks. And they should all be up in arms about being forced to themselves wearing a mask and forcing their kids that they see as pediatricians to wear a mask when they don't know the risk. And they see the risk. They've told me that bacterial pneumonia thing they're seeing in kids, my kids have gotten bacterial infections. So just on that level, they're doing harm. And they know better. They're physicians, but they're afraid of losing their job to speak up for the health and safety of their own patients.
Brenna, to your point, in the UK and Dublin, forget the woman's name, but she used to be the head of virology, epidemiological studies at the minister level in Dublin. And she's doing this now. She's actually uniting people to go after physicians personally because it affects their insurance as well. If you've got a number of potential legal actions against you. So it's interesting. She's also started a whole Freedom Airways. I was on the Corbett Report last week, but basically getting people to come together, book their own flights. So I think there's one, for example, in a month where people can go from Dublin to Florida, so.
Is Dublin, New Hampshire or
No,
Dublin,
Dublin, Ireland.
Dublin, Ireland?
But, I think there's been some similar things in California where people have kind of come together and they're going after people personally now.
So when you say they're going after people, who's that?
Lawsuit legally, based on what you just said, a similar, I am not a lawyer, but, basically going after people for harm, right? Because people are finding harm. There's also people that have had insurance matters impacted by this. We all know a lot of financial harm as well as actual health, or people that can't have access to their dying grandparents. There's a lot of things like that now where people are trying to take action within the system. I don't know whether it'll be effective, but I think at least that's an action and more people need to come together and do that.
I agree. I've been saying that for a long time. I am an attorney. I'm not a litigator per se. I do transactional work, intellectual property work, but I've been saying that for a long time, even with respect to these mandates, which are not laws. I mean, these are really just edicts that come down from some executive order under an emergency power. And I think a good approach is to, I don't like the idea of taking something out on small businesses or this kind of thing, but the small businesses and big businesses are essentially being enlisted to do the state's dirty work. They're being utilized to serve. And that is the epitome of fascism. That's what fascism is. When an airline kicks off a family because a 2-year-old wouldn't wear a mask that's useless anyway, especially in that environment, that's fascism. And so the response, I think a good response would be to actually file suit against individuals personally, whatever the cause of action you can come up with. And the justification isn't because you're looking for a court to award you big money damages. The justification is to slowly chip away at this tyrannical system, to begin to so that individuals recognize that if I keep doing the state's bidding, if I keep enforcing these ridiculous edicts, then I have to personally now answer it. Come win or lose, I have to pay legal fees. I have to go through the stress of dealing with this. Imagine the manager at the grocery store who's kicked you out because you didn't wear a mask, gets sued for harassment. And then 2 weeks later, he gets sued for harassment again. And then 3 weeks later, he gets sued for harassment once again. That's the approach. Eventually, he's going to say, I'm done.
Yeah, no, I think those are all great things, but I think those are maybe better served in the weekly meeting as opposed, because I really want to, pull in some time away from the kids
Right,
here
that's true.
running
Right,
amok.
you're right.
But maybe I'd really love to hear maybe some coping strategies on dealing with the kids, with the anxiety and the anger that the kids are feeling. And I don't know, maybe some strategies for parents for dealing with the kids with, that we're not, we're balancing that, or I don't want my children to think that I'm the bad guy keeping them out of society. And I think, as an almost 8-year-old, my son has a good understanding of that, but still he's, it's the same thing, stupid corona. I mean, my even 3-year-old is going, stupid coronavirus, stupid coronavirus. So I'm really looking for maybe some help there, some ideas.
Organization.
For these, my
I'd
little
love
guys.
to see organization. I wish we had more groups where we can bring our kids together and get that social interaction. It's difficult, I know, and everybody's particularly, busy with kids at home and working and doing all of these things. But it's important. I wish I had more outlets for that. We do try, my wife and I, to meet up with other families, but it would be nice to see maybe more, let's say formal, but there's sort of more proper scheduling of that kind of interactivity would be, I think, a huge help for us, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so, Victoria, you were looking for help. You said a couple things. One was dealing with the anxiety, dealing with the upsetness, and then also dealing with not having your kids think of you as the bad guy who's restricting them.
Correct. Yes. Because, we don't want to be the bad guys that are stopping them from, my son is desperate to go to school. And like I said, I'm not putting a mask on him, or even just like, we went skiing and the ski patrol, they were out, the little Stasi, telling me, it's cold. So I had my balaclava covering my mouth, but I'm not going to cover my nose outside. And I don't put up with stupid. And yeah. I spent, like, my degree from McGill University is in history and political science with a concentration in Russia and Eastern Europe. So I studied totalitarianism at a very high level with professors who were escapees from those systems. I'm not going to do it. I'm not putting on a yellow star, not doing it. And so my poor son says, Mommy, why do we have to get in a fight every time we go out? I've got the ski patrol telling me to cover my nose. And I was, no, you're telling me. I'm like, no, I can't. I'll get bacterial pneumonia. I had to pull my mask down to talk to him because as I'm talking through a mask, I can feel my lungs getting restricted. And everything is, you go out and you've got my kids in tow, trying to do stuff, and then everything is a fight. And I fight. I'm not quiet. I tell people, and I just don't put up with the BS. I've been done with it all for a long time.
Yeah.
Even before this.
Right. Well, I think that's great. Let's hear what other people think in this group on this issue of not seeming like you're the bad guy because you're restricting them from participating in certain things right now.
That is the
Anybody?
trickiest balance. I think it's a really good point, right? Because you want to raise children who are not fearful and who will stand up for themselves. But this is what the divide and conquer strategy, right? Is it makes us the bad guys because we don't go along. And that is a very difficult thing to explain. Sorry, David.
I have a question. My understanding is that among us there are teachers. Is that right? Someone's a teacher here, I think. So I have a question. So in terms of who's responsible for this, I think when the parent is considered, as obviously in the house as the authority figure, giving the instructions to your children, then by default, you're the source of the content. Is there a way, and this is one thing that maybe you guys can help me with, and this is a little off subject, but not really. If property taxes are essentially the wages of the public school officials, the superintendent on down, the teachers, how does this work with the teachers union? What are the teachers, does it seem like the resistance for returning back to the building is somehow in the mythology of it sourced from the teachers union? What are they on about? And is there a way to control their behavior through the idea that we pay their salaries through our property taxes? Is there anybody have any ideas about that? And perhaps that could shift the onus away from the parents and put it back into the school system where it seems to belong.
Well, I can talk about that a bit. I don't teach in the public schools. I teach at Franklin Pierce. And the pressure on me is coming from the other teachers who have not read peer-reviewed studies, who believe the 6 o'clock news, and who have bought into, this general knowledge concept about how horrible COVID is. So we have teachers in the public schools who are buying into this idea, and they're most afraid, more than the kids. And in the colleges, it's the professors, believe it or not, and they've put pressure on me. And I've been there long enough that they know that it's not going to bother me one way or the other. But it's really the teachers who are driving the school closures. And we have to understand that. It's their fear. The administrators are going to do whatever the teachers do because the teachers are boycotting. They're saying, I'm not going to go back to work. I'm not going to be in the classroom. It's too unsafe for me. So if we had the ability to influence the teachers, that is what's going to get your kids back in school, in my opinion.
So how does one do that? How do you advocate
Well,
to the teachers collectively?
So we have a union, and it's a pretty strong union. And I have a plan in my mind of what I will do if I'm told, well, you can't teach without a mask. I'm going to go to the union and I'm going to say, I want you to represent me because my rights to teach, by the way, I think I've had COVID already, and so is my whole family. I'm quite sure we have antibodies. And where is the testing? Why can't I get testing to teach at Franklin Pierce? They're giving testing for the virus, but I want testing to show and prove to people that I'm not a carrier, I'm not going to spread it. And so that unions are where the teachers will, they stand behind whatever the union will do for them and what they can do for them. So all it takes is one teacher or one professor to go to the union for support. And there's no way that a college could support this idea in court that all these kids are dying, that all these kids are at risk, and that I have to wear a mask. So it may be just one or two people in the school systems that say, I want to be in the classroom and I'm going to do it without that mask on. And you can fire me. And as soon as they say, I'm going to fire you, that person can go to the union and the union will win the case hands down. I'm sure of it, because the school system has no leg to stand on, really, because the kids don't die. So anyway, it's the unions.
So what about Victoria's question though, about how you're dealing? Are your kids getting upset with you for limiting some of their activities? And if so, what are you doing in response?
My son seems to be focused on the source of the problem, but I think that's because he's spending probably way too much time around myself and my wife when he hears us, I guess discussing things. And so he's always blaming, he'll mouth off about, stupid coronavirus or the government, he'll say kind of vaguely as if it's the government's fault. And well, I mean, in many respects, that's why we're dealing with the restrictions. But so he's not blaming us for the changes in his life. My concern is that he's getting almost too accustomed to this sort of, sheltered, insulated kind of lack of social activity.
Yeah. How about other people? Are other people finding their kids upset with them about what's happening?
Is anybody familiar with the Tuttle Twins out there? It's kind of a book series, but it's written from a there's a standpoint of understanding the state and the state's overreach from a kid's point of view. I read those with my son, and he gets the concept, and I think as he matures over the next couple of years, I think he'll really have a good understanding of what's happening here, because even though the stories aren't related to COVID and that kind of thing, they're related to how government overreach can become a problem, and the concept of unintended consequences. So sometimes I'll say, well, sort of like, remember we read about in that story, this is kind of the same thing. So it's been I didn't really plan it that way, but it's been somewhat of a resource, I think, for me.
So I don't know, Victoria, has anything said so far been helpful with that issue for you, or are you still like, well, I got.
I just I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know, while we're in this stuck place, I don't know. I don't know. Just, well, my son, it's funny, he's a real history buff. So he has been, as a history major, so I guess he gets it from me. He's been a fan of George Washington since he was 2 years old. And we've been to all the reenactments and all the forts and the Revolution and French and Indian War. And this summer we weren't able to go to anything. So, that was a real bummer, but he'll actually even say when we read about the smallpox outbreak during Valley Forge, he's like, they can fight a war with smallpox. but I can't go to school because of stupid coronavirus. So he gets it, but it's just, he has the other issues, and just, it's just hard that can't see the other friends, and just we're all kind of getting on each other's nerves being home all the time without the outlets for us as parents either.
I'm very proactive about trying to get together, whether it's with Vicky and her
Yes.
family or
Yeah.
other families. But recently, they just started allowing the other Waldorf kids back, except they put restrictions that they can't then interact with people like us who are homeschooling and so forth. So another new implementation of the divide and conquer strategy.
Wow. Victoria,
Yeah,
you
we're
know,
losing
go
one of our little playmates, so who now can't play with us because, or even, and that's what I don't understand. It's like, I know it's a private school, so as with a private school, that's it, what their rules are. You can try to influence, but it's different than a public school. They don't have that obligation that I think the public schools have, that obligation to be open right now. But to lose one of our little playmates and not even, like, we couldn't even go out to dinner at a restaurant. It's like, well, there are parents in the school who work in the hospital, and so those parents can go to a hospital where people actually have coronavirus and send their kids to the school, but the kids who can't spread it to each other at that age can't see each other out in a restaurant. But the parents could go out to a restaurant, but they can't go out to a restaurant when we're there. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. None of this makes any sense. And I guess that's hard to explain.
yeah,
I wanted to mention real quick, next week, maybe John Michael can post it, but there's a 5-day free conference all focused on solutions called the Greater Reset. So basically what they've done is taken all the dystopian stuff of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, and they've a 5-day agenda, different speakers around the world, all focused on solutions. So that's something worth noting, the Greater Reset. It's, of course, censored from YouTube like anything intelligent. So you got to go to library or Float, LBRY, but people should get their hands on that. And I go to now Fokine Great because they don't mask their employees and they don't harass you. I try to go twice a week. When I find places they're doing the right thing, I support them. We all sat at the communal table last week. We need more things like that. People coming together, having a good time, laughing, not being scared of the air, leading by example.
yeah.
I actually, I just saw, I'll send it to John Michael in email, and he maybe could put it up as a resource on the website. This was a couple of years ago. I guess they're social scientists of some kind, and this woman found this in Sardinia, the island off Italy, where they have the most centenarians, and she went to figure out why these people live so long. And then she found another person who had already done another study about longevity, and they had a whole list of things that didn't affect longevity, whether you quit smoking or you were thin or this or that. The two things were the number 2 instance for longevity was close relationships, having somebody that you see in your family or a neighbor who helps out the elderly. And the number 1 thing was community interaction. So do you talk to the guy who's serving you coffee? Like, are you interactive when you're in the community? The community interaction was wasn't your close level of friendship, but it was just you being out in the community. And, obviously we're talking about kids here, but look at that importance to get to be a centenarian. How do people, and now I see that, and I think of my poor mother-in-law in prison and assisted living. We sprung her for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then they're robbing. That's the other thing. It's like our children are being robbed of their grandmother who has Alzheimer's, and she had a hard time remembering their names. She doesn't remember my parents. We're at my parents' house, and then on the way home, she's asking my husband, "Oh, who was that nice couple?" I mean, she's known my parents for 16 years. And so she's not going to remember any of us next holidays. She's not going to remember who the kids are. And they've just robbed my children of their grandmother. Now the whole thing is sick.
Yeah, and that's part of the difficulty in explaining to your young children, because a lot of stuff doesn't actually make sense. It's not reasonable. So I think he's a history buff. You may want to put it in a historical context where there's some trends that are happening that you've seen, studied before in history, and we're part of the group that's aware of it and doing something about it, or trying to. So you can put it in those kinds of in that kind of a frame for him. And also, this is an opportunity, just to work on basic skills with kids anyways, like frustration tolerance, anxiety. How do you deal with anxiety? Do you do breathing exercises? Do you talk to some, whatever the techniques that are comfortable for your kid. But this is a time to practice some of that stuff to help them be more resilient. This is a bad time. But I really like what Marcus was saying and Frank about organizing and maybe connecting with like-minded people where you can have normal get-togethers.
And to that, a footnote there, because I know Samantha was talking about barns and I pinged her, but my wife has a ton of horses. A lot of them are boarded. But one of the positive things is we have kids here every day. And like, even when it's 10 degrees, it's been like, but they have nowhere else to go. So we've become like a beacon of place where people can breathe, unmasked, be with animals, be in nature, so we all have to be that light in the world now more than ever.
So maskless riding lessons in Alstead in the hidden corner of New Hampshire.
It makes a difference here. That's all that matters.
That's great. Yeah, if you can get there.
Yeah, and I noticed this trend, like I think I might watch some of the same programs some of you guys watch online. And there's a trend now where they realize that the establishment is doing a bunch of unreasonable stuff, and that we can fight and try to influence what's happening there, but also we should put our energy into creating our own activities, organizations, systems. That's a direction, instead of just fighting against, which there are times to fight, but there's also, it's a good time to start turning and starting to build, to create.
David, I've always had this idea of going en masse to the food co-op to shop and taking the kids along and see what would happen. A group of 20 people, 30 people, all without masks, and go in and start shopping. Just the daily activities. Meet together, go into the hardware store as a group. What are they going to do?
Well, you see, people started doing that. That's actually a thing that you see all over the country.
I've got a small group of maskless friends that literally we started in the summer for like different Hannaford. So I've been chased out of the Nashua Hannaford, and I have a doctor's note. I have a medical condition. I saw what was coming early on. I called my doctor. I'm like, I'm not putting one on. It puts my health at risk. I get migraines. Like, don't make me do it. And she was like, well, you should, you have to, you need to. I said, no. She goes, well, what if your job makes you? I said, I'll quit. And she goes, okay, I'll give you the note. So I have a note, but in Nashua, because there's an external ordinance, they demand to see it. They want to take pictures of it. They want copies. They want my last name. They want my driver's license to verify that my note is legit. And the manager there has called the cops on me, and the cops just kind of do nothing. a lady at Shell Station has called the cops on me for walking in without a mask. I mean, it's getting so ridiculous that I started banding up with some friends, and I've got 3 kids. So, I mean, I've got the gaggle of girls, I've got my best friend and his son, and, you know, I've got the dad. And so we're all kind of like going into like different places, just normal grocery shopping. We're grabbing 3 different carts. We're walking down different aisles, you know, and then we're like meeting up at the end of the aisle, like high-fiving, and then going down a different aisle. So it does make people think, because people will start talking to us and ask about it. It is good. If you guys can do it, I highly recommend grabbing some friends and doing it, because it strikes up conversation. We have shirts that we got at that breakfast that say "My nose is my mask," so we tend to wear that out. That sparks conversation. So there are ways to kind of open the gateway to conversation. A lady in Target literally stopped me a few weeks ago with my oldest, because we go in, all of us unmasked, and she had her and like 2 or 3 kids, and they were all masked up, and she stopped me, and I thought she was gonna, you know, do the Karen thing that I've gotten from a few different people, but she was just like, "Good for you." And I was like, "You know what, thank you." I was like, "Maybe one day you'll be brave enough to take yours off too," and just smiled and walked away. And so there's hope, but we're the 1%. Like, we're the 1% right now, unfortunately. So
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't, in Keene, I don't have any problem at Price Chopper or the Hannafords in Keene. Nobody's, a couple of times people have offered me when I enter, and I just say I can't, and I just walk in. And I haven't been, but the co-op was really nasty to me in the summer when nothing was happening. So I haven't been back since July, when they did the mask mandate. And I have my money I need to use by February, my co-op, whatever you call it, from shopping, my dividend or whatever. So I got to figure out how I can get my dividend money from them. But they were nasty. So I don't know. I haven't had a problem in the supermarkets, Home Depot. I just say I can't. If someone goes a little bit further with me, I just say, mask gave me bacterial pneumonia, chronic, and I can't wear them. I will cough. Do you want me to cough? You know, it kind of makes it worse. And I try to smile and be polite, and I stand back. I've had a couple people come up to me in stores. Actually, one guy in Target in Keene came up to me. He's like, "How do you do it?" And I said, "Just walk in." And then he got too close to me, and I'm like, "I don't like close talkers anyway." And he's right up on me like this. And I'm like, "Guy." But he asked me how I do it. "How do you shop without a mask?" I'm like, "I just walk in." And, you know, I legitimately have a health concern now. I also learned that I had thyroid cancer and my thyroid removed, so I have a nice scar here. And I actually found out that if you have had any kind of surgery on your throat or neck or intubation, you're actually prone to bacterial pneumonia. So, you know, there you go. So if you know anyone who's ever had any kind of surgery on their neck, that is their medical issue. Even if they're 100% healed, that will make you prone to bacterial pneumonia. Mm.
To illustrate just how insidious the sort of, we'll call them tyrannical forces working against us are, they've organized provocateurs into these groups that go into the stores maskless. When they do, the reporters are there, and the group act like complete jerks. They berate the clerks, they blurt out obnoxious things while they're there, and then they get them on camera and they say ridiculous things like, you know, we're being forced into a satanic ritual, and they try to make the people look as ridiculous and, you know, insane and unhinged as they can. And then this is the public persona of the people that resist these things. And my son, I mean, getting back to the kids, right? My son came in to me the other day and he says to me, he goes, "You know, Dad," he goes, he plays a couple of different, like Minecraft, and he plays Pokemon Go. He says every challenge he's had in Pokemon Go has been against an avatar, a Pokemon with a mask. All the characters are masked now. You see in schools, the mascots, you know, the Cougars, you know, and the picture of the cougar on the wall has a mask on its face now. This is, it's insane. I mean, that's just the reason why I chose to keep my kid away from it. I don't see, you know, that's a very difficult thing to overcome when you have that kind of propaganda machine working. And of course, it begs the question, you know, is this really about a virus? I mean, that we want to embrace this disruption to our social order into infinity? Is it ever just come to an end? We say, okay, you guys can, you know, relax now. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
I said that in March, Frank, right? You could go to the stores and they were putting permanent decals down.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this.
Right.
There's
It's
so
strange.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, all this for 2
Metal
weeks. So we're gonna
signs, metal
spend the
signs
money
being
on-
piled into the ground, right?
Yeah.
Actually,
Guys,
my son did get, when I was being outspoken, I pulled into, there's a little pig farm near us in Keene, on the edge of Keene, and they have a great little farm store, and they have other farms bring their produce there that they sell. And there's a woman with a Vermont plate pulls in right before me. Oh God. And of course she gets out first, and then I'm unbuckling my kids from the car seat. It's like a converted carriage house that they have as their little farm store. And she stops, looks at us with no masks. It's freezing cold. Where are your masks? I said, I can't wear them for health reasons. You're not gonna wear a mask? I'm like, it's outside. I'm like, fine, go in the store ahead of us if you want. And she's looking at the kids. She's like, what about them? I'm like, then I got angry because I was being polite. And I'm like, no, I will not put masks on my children. Children do not spread coronavirus. They're incapable of it physically. So that she's like, my children, I have 5 children. And she's asking me where I went to college. I didn't answer. She's telling me all her kids have all these PhDs and everything. And I'm like, yeah, well, I went to school with a lot of PhD track people and they wouldn't know how to, you know, these are the people within, sorry, Jean, I got the doctor here and the David, but honest to God, like, you know, McGill is like PhD track, the medical school, you know, they call it the Harvard of Canada. I mean, a lot of smart people there, but it's like, okay, you're in the PhD program, but what don't you understand about not melting cheese in the toaster oven without the tray? You keep catching it on fire over and over again. Like, you know, you're supposed to be smart, you know, or another one falls down and dislocates their shoulder and wants to know what to do. And I'm like, we live 3 blocks from the emergency room. You know, those ambulances that go by, follow one up the hill. So, you know, this lady's trying to tell me her 5 kids and their PhDs and screaming at me. And then I'm screaming at her. So finally, and I'm out in the cold and waiting for her to use the stupid farm store. She's in there forever. So finally I go, listen, lady, I'm like, you're taking too long. I've got little kids. I got to get home. So she's all mad. She storms out. She tells my son, I had put the little one in the car, and she tells him, your mother needs to learn her manners. And
Oh, Jesus Christ.
you know, so she's lecturing him about me, and he tells me that later. And the poor kid, you know, normally he would put up a good show to me that he's going to say this and he's going to say that. But when it comes to being with other adults that he doesn't know, he's going to be polite and quiet, the way kids should, thank God. But for once, I actually wanted my kid to talk back. I wanted my 7-year-old to talk back to this lady. That's how bad it's gotten. Like for me, like, and I was raised, my dad was a Marine and we were not to speak. We were kids and we were how to be quiet. And that's how I was raised. And I wanted my kid to talk back. I wanted him to tell her to fly a kite or give her a science lesson. And it's not good for anyone's mental health.
So guys, I'm thinking about having us wrap up soon. Is there some burning thought or question people wanted to just talk about before we wrap up? Because I feel like we could go on, and which is fine on the one hand, but there's a limit.
Right. What are your impressions? What are the expert impressions?
What are my impressions? Much like yours. I mean, I think the world's gone mad, and I think for my son, he's been able to adapt, but it's been bad for him. He's a very social kid, and he wants to go to school because of that. So he goes to school every other week and wears a mask. I gave him the option. He's 16, so I feel like he should be more involved in the decision making. And I gave him the option to homeschool, to remote school, whatever he wants to do. But he so desperately wants to be around other kids that he goes to school and wears a mask. And he doesn't believe that the mask is protective for him. And it's not comfortable. And he's usually in a bad mood by the end of the day when he's worn a mask all day. You know, so we're fighting the same fight. We're trying to strike the balance at home. We got into a period where we talked too much about the situation and it was too much of a negative focus. And so we recognize that. And more recently, we've been trying to be mindful of not dwelling on the negative. We know it's there and we'll fight the fights we can fight. But most of the time I'm trying now to focus us on our lives and making them as rich as possible. So instead of talking about, you know, the situation like we often do at dinner, last night I read some poetry after dinner. You know, I'm just trying to shift a bit and start focusing on what I want my life to be like and what I want our lives to be like and what I want to be part of creating. And so I think conversations like this are good because a big part of it is connecting with others who have similar concerns and goals and maybe doing some further organization with each other where we can connect, whether it's for social things for kids or for other things for us.
I want to say that I am so proud of my kids for what they've done to promote the education of the world. And Liam's letters to the Shopper News,
Right.
I am just so proud of. You know, they can't get him to work at school to do his English, but he sure writes those letters, and he's written a lot of letters to Congress people. And you know, I feel comfortable with where my kids are, and maybe it's because they're a little older and they're not resentful. I think about, you know, I'm outspoken when I'm out in public and they tell me sometimes, Mom, just don't start an argument right now. Can't we just get this done? But in the end, they come through, and Liam is he's more of an advocate than I am. So, you know, it can happen as kids get older. It really can. Yeah.
So he's growing, you know, with this adversity. You're seeing some growth in Liam.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question. I don't know who would be a good person to respond to this, but maybe David, I would assume. One of the concerns I had, of course, the masking is a big, huge part of it, both physically, psychologically. But the other thing that I'm concerned about in the school environment is, and from what I've seen, what I've observed, what I've heard is, you know, the day is essentially resolves to the teachers. It's a disciplinary thing, nonstop. You know, every 3 minutes, it's about separating children and, you know, don't touch your mask and don't do. And my concern would be, and I guess if I had like a 16-year-old, I'd probably shrug my shoulders and say, at this point, he's almost cooked. You know, it's not really, he can probably shrug it off and say, all right, big deal, this is stupid, but I'll do it. My 7-year-old, how long does it take before it starts to affect them psychologically? Day in, day out, they shouldn't be this close to another person. Oh, it's not right to affectionately pat your friend on the back because you shouldn't touch another person. And I don't want that for my kids. I don't want to live in that freaking world. You know, I don't want my kids to grow up thinking that, you know, every freaking person they see and meet is a biohazard. And I don't know how long it takes before that begins to actually kind of take root in their psychology. And then that's how they begin to see the world. And everything around us now reinforces that. You go get a 6-pack, stand here, don't come too close. You know, it starts to, you know, I don't know. That's my concern. I don't know how long it would take before that's, you know, becomes a more permanent damage.
I'm curious with that, with the people with kids in public schools, do they do the whole Orwellian loudspeaker stuff like they do at the grocery store? You know, where they're like repeating the same droning messages of staying separate, and I'm just curious.
Teachers do it individually. And there's always this undercurrent of stay safe. Everything is finished. Every sentence, stay safe. And
I
my
say
kids
at the grocery store, when they say that to me, I say, no, thank you. I like risk. I like a little danger. That's become my new thing. Every time anybody says it to me, I say, nope, no, thank you.
That's great.
gotta laugh. My kids make some good jokes. We laugh at them every day at what the teachers say.
Yeah. And Frank, I don't know in terms of permanency, but I think that the kids have been somewhat traumatized. I think the whole population has been. And I think, you know, when you are traumatized, what you learn about what you need to do to be safe, I think it does take root. I think it's going to be a somewhat lasting thing that lingers, even if we are to go back to normal. I don't think it'll just poof go away, but I think over time it would, you know. But I do think it's unfortunately they're planting seeds, you know. They know what they're doing, you know. When if you traumatize people, you can get them to do almost anything. If you tell them,
definitely.
And that's what they've done to the population. So.
I've been, my wife and I, just if anybody's interested in seeing looking for something to look at, we've been watching the documentary on the NXIVM cult. I heard the story in the news. I was not that familiar about how it worked and what it was about. But if anybody's interested in looking at something, what I found tremendously revealing about this documentary is that how this cult operated is exactly what we're seeing play out in our broader society, almost to a T. Every single technique and tactic that was employed within the cult is being employed in the broader society. I was blown away and looking at that, and I must have said it 100 times to my wife, my God, this is exactly what's happening to us. It's really quite mind-blowing.
It's in the word, right? Culture. Just like government. If you look at the word, gubernare mentis, it means to control the mind. It's all in plain sight.
A lot of things are. People just don't notice it or look for it. All right, so I guess we should wrap up. I don't know if this was a one-off event, or if they think it'd be useful to have another one. I'm willing to do another one at some point. So I guess that'd be a conversation with John Michael